Yup, it happened. Ooh, I might have to reconsider one of my positions here. So those of you who have followed the channel know that I've been a very big Pam Bondi defender. When every other, big Second Amendment YouTuber was railing against Pam Bondi, I had some things to say that I thought kind of tempered that discourse a little bit. Not today. Not today. The ATF, and with the Department of Justice filing this, has filed a brief in the Hoffman Tactical case. And this is just blatantly anti-Second Amendment. There's no other way of looking at it. This is an anti-Second Amendment move. There's no argument. This is just what it is. This is a brief filed by Pam Bondi's Department of Justice on behalf of the ATF, and it is just anti-Second Amendment. It's anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment. We're going to get into it. It's really, honestly, pretty bad. I'm going to pop this lineup in for you in just a second about what specifically they said. It's ugly. Before we do that, though, if you're new, subscribe, and let's get into it. Okay, so this is from the brief itself. I'll pop it up right now on screen. This is the most important sentence, I think, of the whole thing. The ATF has an interest in limiting the sale and distribution of FRTs. The ATF serves as the primary federal regulator of the firearms industry. As part of its mission, ATF seeks to enhance public safety by enforcing laws and regulations related to firearms. There is no other way of saying this. That is the anti-gun framing. That is absolutely, positively the anti-gun framing. You can disagree with me on the comments, you can hate on me in the comments, but I don't think that many of you will. The reality is, you can make a case, if they filed something that said, listen, the ATF, we have these sets of regulations and maybe they're a bit outdated, but technically this falls into that category, so technically we think maybe it should be banned in this case, maybe we'll change that policy. That's one thing. And I would hate that too, and I would disagree with that, and I'd rail against that in the video. But that's not what they said. They said, as part of its mission, I'll pop it right back up on screen. As part of its mission, ATF seeks to enhance public safety by enforcing laws and regulations related to firearms. They seek to enhance public safety by enforcing laws and regulations related to firearms. That is the anti-gun framing. The idea that firearms are a threat, primary threat to public safety. The idea that regulating, right, the definitions and the specs of a firearm to help public safety is exactly what the whole point of the anti-gunners are. At this point, just ban it, say, an AR-15, it harms public safety, let's ban that too. That is the logic. This is not what they've done, right? They've specified this is in relation to FRTs, but fundamentally it's the same logic. You can make this argument and apply it to AR-15s. You can make this argument and apply it to large capacity magazines. You can make this argument and apply it to literally anything. Bump stocks, literally handguns. You can say, handguns, harm public safety. So it's the ATF's mission to regulate them. You can make that argument. And you know what? From their point of view, from their logic, in this brief, they would be right. This is fundamentally one of the most anti-Second Amendment briefs I have ever seen out of the Department of Justice. Under Pam Bondi, don't get me wrong. There have been a lot worse, under Biden. But under Pam Bondi, this is a new low. This just is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to say any other kind of way. This is just unbelievably anti-Second Amendment. I think there's more to this story than a lot of people have said while covering it. As you guys know, I have been a defender of Pam Bondi, right? So I'm fully aware, by the way, as Attorney General of Florida, she defended open carry bans, she defended 18 to 20-year-old handgun possession bans, and she defended, which is the worst one by far, red flag laws, right? Which literally violate the due process of a gun owner. You get your guns confiscated with pretty much no immediate recourse. In the middle of the night, you can hear a knock. There was no court case, there was nothing. Essentially, without any ability to represent yourself, she defended a law which would allow the government to just come in and take your guns. She is anti-Second Amendment, or at least she's not a principled Second Amendment advocate. I've always admitted that. What I have said, though, is I think that a lot of the people inside of the Department of Justice have kind of pushed her more towards the Second Amendment side, and that a lot of her actions actually can kind of be interpreted in a pro-Second Amendment lens, kind of if you look at them in sort of a long-term view. You can't really with the wording of this. Now, I get the counter-argument. Maybe she didn't approve this. Maybe, this was a rogue person that did this. It's not. But yeah, this is really bad. Really, really, really bad. It just is. I think this points to a couple different problems. The first and biggest one of those problems is that even though a lot of the personnel, the top in the ATF aren't gone, the mentality of the ATF remains. If you think about the ATF, most of their work actually involves, and this is the same with like ICE and the same with any of the regulatory agencies, most of their work involves investigating the misuse of a technology, right? That's just the case. And so they build up in their head this idea that certain types of firearms are associated with criminals, right? That's kind of just from their perspective how they do that. That rot is still infected. That rot is still sitting. Like, from the perspective of a police officer, it's a little bit more understandable that they would be anti-Second Amendment because, if there's, I'm just peaceably carrying, they don't interact with me, right? But they do interact with a criminal who's, misusing their firearm in some way. That's all true. That is true. And to some degree, that's understandable. It makes sense. Again, not at all my perspective, but I get where they're coming from with that, even if I don't agree with it at all. This is going above and beyond, and it's really bad. It's honestly really, really bad. So obviously, for those of you who don't know, a force reset trigger essentially helps you increase the rate of fire of a firearm that you install it in, right? It doesn't, though, fundamentally cause multiple bullets to be fired for one trigger action, which is the definition of a machine gun. It's a similar principle, not technologically, but it's a similar principle legally to a bump stock, right? A bump stock also increases the rate of fire. By the way, bump stocks are kind of silly in my opinion. They're fun, but they're not really a serious self-defense weapon. But that's not for them to make that determination. That's for us, right? It's like saying, you can have a pistol, but you can't have a shotgun. Well, in some circumstances, I do want a pistol. Most of the time, I do just want a pistol. But that's not your decision to make. It's mine. I'm the law-abiding American gun owner. I can choose what I use to defend myself, my family, and my country, right? That's the reality. And the ATF here has pretty much said the quiet part out loud. That mentality of sort of certain types of firearms bad and we need to regulate them, that's still in the organization. And there's not any way around that. That's what this brief shows. Listen, I'm all for the ATF. If someone is making a dangerous gun, like, I don't know, a gun that, goes off when you don't pull the trigger, or a gun that's, barreling is not correct, whatever. If someone's making a gun that's a danger to the person using it, if used correctly, that's absolutely their responsibility to regulate. Same way, if someone's making a piece of software that doesn't work, I should be able to get my money back and there should be some legal recourse. No argument with that either, right? That's reasonable. If someone's making a firearm that's dysfunctional in some way, sure, come and regulate it. I have no problem with that. The problem is when you associate the firearm itself with being dangerous other than its intended use, right? The reality is, if I take an FRT and I point it, towards a hill, with some targets on it and pull the trigger, everything's fine. No one's hurt. Didn't kill anyone. It's all good. No problem. It's the same with an AR-15, right? If I took an AR-15 and I pointed at a target and pulled the trigger, it's all fine. No one got hurt. No problem at all. Now, if I take it and point it at someone, that's where the problem is. And so that's what the law should be too. I shouldn't be able to take my AR-15 and kill someone with it. That should be illegal. And it is. That type of firearm regulation, I have no problem with. The problem is framing the firearm itself as like an evil or dangerous good in itself. And that's what they've done here. That is fundamentally the logic of the anti-gunners. There's no way around it. That is what it is fundamentally. So where do we go from here? I'm not sure what the Supreme Court's going to decide on the FRT issue, or even if they will bother to. The reality is there isn't the political appetite for this. Certain people do care. I care. But I don't own an FRT, right? Like I've seen them, but I've never owned one. I've actually never shot one either. Would I be interested to? Yeah. Would it use up a lot of ammo and it's kind of expensive? Yeah, that's true too. So it's not really an item I've ever been interested in purchasing. And probably for a lot of you, that's the same, right? It's not something I need. It's not something I've ever really wanted from a self-defense perspective. It's not something I've ever owned. That's the reality. So the appetite among ordinary Americans who aren't super involved in the Second Amendment movement is kind of apathy. It just is. And that leads to kind of this attitude, right? That, this is okay. We can regulate this. No one's really going to push back on it. And in my opinion, where we go from here is probably FRTs will eventually get banned and that will be upheld, in my opinion. Maybe we'll be proved wrong. Who knows? We'll take a look at it whenever that comes through, but you never know. Anyway, I would love to know what you guys think. Do you agree with my analysis? Maybe I wasn't the most coherent as I could be there, but that's honestly just the way I feel. You can disagree with me in the comments below. I'd love to hear another explanation for this, but in my opinion, this is that classic ATF rot that to some degree isn't gone, and it won't be for a while. Remember, also, this is another point, but remember, like, a lot of the agents in ICE currently are, as we found out, in the last couple of weeks, are the same agents that were under Obama, and in some cases that were under Bush, right? So these agencies keep and retain people quite a long time, and it's probably the same in the ATF. And so the culture can't change that as quickly as the people at the top. And to some degree, the people at the top don't necessarily want to change it. Now, that's not to say there's some great people in the Department of Justice. Harmeet Dillon is great. There's a lot of individual lawyers that are great, but This one, I'm not so sure about. Anyway, hope you did enjoy the video. If you did, please subscribe down below if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you guys so much.